This episode of Show Me the Meaning is brought to you by Mubi, a curated online cinema streaming exceptional films from around the globe. This episode of Show Me the Meaning is also sponsored by Cover. Save time and money with Cover. Visit cover.com/wisecrack to get started. Hey everyone, welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast. My name is Jared.
Oh shit, we don't have anybody that's going to do the scream this week.
You can do it. You can do it, man.
What if Greg does it this week?
Greg, can you scream Show Me the Meaning?
Show me the meaning!
Hell yeah. My name is Jared. I'm joined with a pretty different crew, but a full, vigorous group today. We got Austin.
Hey, what's going on?
And the only man who makes my voice sound high-pitched on the airwaves, Greg Edwards.
Hey, what's going on?
And one of my favorite Matrix nerds, a writer and researcher for Wisecrack, Rebecca Sinclair. How you doing, Rebecca?
I'm well, Jared. Good to be here.
Yeah, great to have you guys. I'm so excited to be talking about a movie that I cannot overstate its importance in my life. Today we're talking about The Matrix, the 1999 film written and directed by the Wachowskis, starring Keanu Reeves, Lawrence Fishburne, and Carrie-Anne Moss. As always, let's go around. I want to hear what it was like the first time you watched this movie and what it's like revisiting it. Let's start with Rebecca.
Oh, geez. I thought I was for sure going to have a second to think about that. So yeah, first time it was pretty mind blowing. I mean, I was quite young, but it was one of the first films I ever saw that like starred a super powerful female. And it was interesting as I rewatched it this time, I got the chills again when the film opens and like Trinity's just like kicking ass. It was super cool for me then. It was super cool for me now. And I have to say that it's one of the first moments I could like not stop talking about The Matrix. And I kind of got into science fiction vis-a-vis Matrix and films like it. And that actually is kind of one of the things that put me into philosophy, which is my career, right? The thinking about movies and with movies. I will say that now, especially after having worked with you and had like at least 12 hours of conversation on The Matrix, probably more, I saw this Matrix movie as kind of mostly just set up for the second two. So it's a kind of controversial position, I admit it, but I think that since we dove into the complexities or philosophical clusterfucks or what have you of the second and third films, I sort of was like, oh, maybe The Matrix is just kind of setting up the more interesting stuff that's happening in the second and third. So I might even be this last time kind of changing my mind on my my ranking for this, which is
Wow,
big for me. So I just want to say,
that is big.
So know that going in. Okay,
cool. What about you, Greg?
Oh, man. I was 19 when this movie came out. I remember seeing the previews for it. I took a girl to it. We went for the midnight movie showing when people weren't shooting up the movies. And it was great, man. I remember that first scene when Trinity jumped up in the air and it paused and it's like, and like you could just hear everybody's like legs clamped together in the movie theater. At the end of the movie, everybody stood up and gave it a standing ovation in a movie theater in like Bubblefuck, Virginia somewhere. You know what I mean? So it was great. I feel like it's groundbreaking. One of my top 10 movies that's not a porn. If you don't have a porn in your top 10 movies, you're lying. I just think it's a great all around movie. It's too bad the other two sucked so bad, but that's how good.
Oh my gosh, I will fight you.
Oh, we can fight. But that's how good the movie is. That the other two had to suck because this one was so groundbreaking.
And what was it like revisiting it this time?
It was great. I mean, man, I'm a nerd. I've watched The Matrix probably as many times as I've watched Forrest Gump, which is weird to say, but I've probably watched The Matrix maybe 75 times. This part one, so I know the movie very well. There are some things that I like caught again. It's always great watching it. It always brings me back, and it always makes me question, like, are we really living in the Matrix? I do have those thoughts sometimes, like with the simulation and Elon Musk and 01, everything's a code. Yeah, I do think that. But, yeah, I love it. It's great. It makes me think, what if Will Smith actually got the role?
Yeah.
This shit would have sucked so bad.
Yeah.
It's so weird to think the original casting was Will Smith as Neo and Val Kilmer as Morpheus.
It would have been awful.
Yeah.
It would have been awful.
It certainly wouldn't be what it is today. All right, what about you, Austin?
I mean, I have no clue about the first time that I saw this movie because kind of like I think like everyone on this podcast is going to say, because I assume, Jared, you're going to say you've seen it a plethora of times too. I've seen it so many times that I don't really remember, but I will say that it's been a long time since I've seen it. And it was actually really refreshing to see it again this time. And like both Greg and Rebecca, that opening scene with Trinity, it actually like affected me this time, and which is why I think it was nice that it had been a while since I'd seen it before, because it actually affected me and it reminded me of how profound this movie actually was. I actually tweeted about it as soon as that movie happened. I was like, "Fuck, man!" Some people talk shit about The Matrix, especially in academic circles, even though like, I mean, I work more in like kind of like post-structuralist, post-phenomenological, quote unquote, postmodern, which is a terrible term. That's why I'm using these other terms. The postmodern circles will say. So they love talking about Baudrillard and Simulacra and whether or not The Matrix got it right or wrong, because Baudrillard famously said he hated the movie. But nevertheless, I was like, man, even if you talk shit about this movie, you cannot deny that this movie did something. Like, it opened up a space in cinema that hadn't been opened before. It was fucking profound, and I think I actually got to like revisit that profundity. It was really lovely to actually enjoy it, and I think the film's fucking awesome, man. It really is quite interesting.
Awesome. So, like Greg, I've probably seen this movie 75 times, maybe even more than that. I can't overstate the importance of this movie in my life. I mean, I think I've told this story before. I know that probably Rebecca's heard it. But just to reiterate, like, this movie is the closest thing, and I know this is going to sound so hyperbolic and insane, but this is the closest thing to religion I ever had in high school. I was like so obsessed. And to tell you guys just how obsessed I was, I sent Chase, can you send them the image? I'm going to show Greg this image. We're going to do a little bit of react here. This is a picture of me when I was 14 years old. A picture of me when I was 14 years old, like Neo. 6 hours early in line waiting to see The Matrix Reloaded because I was so excited. This movie, when I was 12 years old and I saw it for the first time, I left the theater a different person. It blew my mind. It was the first time in my life I'd ever considered that things may not be how they seem. This is the reason why I became obsessed with cinema. Like the movie, you know, it's funny, we released a video on the philosophy of Alan Moore over the weekend, and we talk about how he talks about symbols and art as spellcraft, as how a movie or a piece of art can really just change your perspective. And that's what this movie did to me. This movie completely opened my mind. And, you know, the reason I studied cinema afterwards is because I wanted to find out how could something have such a profound effect on me. You know, like this medium must be so powerful in order to literally change a person from one day to the next, which is what this movie did. And, you know, it's kind of interesting that later in my life I end up kind of going back to philosophy a little bit. And, you know, and now most of what we do in Wisecrack is kind of the intersection of philosophy and movies or media studies and stuff like that. So obviously The Matrix is super duper important to me. I cried watching it last night. It was
awesome.
It was just amazing. This time watching it,
what bit makes you what bit gets you the most? Is it when he becomes the one?
No,
I mean, is it multiple times.
It's actually mostly the first act. When Neo is just kind of in his alienated life, and then Morpheus comes to him, and you know. I mean, also, like, watching it made me realize, just, you know, having seen this movie fucking 75 times makes me realize just how much of my like voiceover is based on the rhythm of Lawrence Fishburne and Hugo Weaving. Like, you know, it's like it's just like little like I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. You know, just so it's just he's amazing. Both of them are so incredible. This time watching it, I'm so glad I rewatched it. Part of me was thinking maybe I don't need to because I know the whole movie by heart. But, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but I found that this movie, I feel like, is like if the 70s counterculture film was Easy Rider, I feel like this is the counterculture film for our generation. But the thing that's crazy about it is that I think it's the counterculture movie for both sides of the political spectrum. We can get into that a little bit later. But first, we're going to go into a recap. So, alienated computer programmer Thomas Anderson, hacker alias Neo, can feel that there is something wrong with the world. So he's searching for a man named Morpheus who can give him the answer to the question that haunts him. All of us at the same time. what is the Matrix? Okay, never mind.
All right.
I'm in the room with them.
Yeah. All right, never mind. What is the Matrix? One day at work, Morpheus calls Neo and attempts to help him escape the pursuit of 3 suited agents, led by the ever-so-stern Agent Smith. After being captured and intimidated by Smith and his cohorts, Neo meets up with Morpheus and his disciple Trinity. Morpheus offers Neo a choice: take the red pill and learn the truth, or take the blue pill and continue living life with his eyes wide shut. Oh, see what I did there? Neo takes the red pill and awakens in a vat where humans are grown to generate electricity for their machine overlords. This is the real world. The world that Neo has known all of his life is just a computer-generated simulation created to enslave humanity. Morpheus explains that he and his crew of rebels are followers of a prophecy that foretells that Morpheus will find the One, who will destroy the Matrix and bring freedom to humanity. Morpheus believes that Neo is this savior. After Neo's training, Morpheus and crew take Neo inside the Matrix to see the Oracle, but Neo is too doubtful to believe that he is the One. On their way back, the crew is betrayed by Cypher, who sold Morpheus out to the agents, who proceed to torture him until they give them access to Zion, humanity's last refuge on Earth. Neo and Trinity gear up and save Morpheus, but right as Neo is about to escape with the rest of the team, Agent Smith destroys their exit and fights Neo mano a mano. Exhibiting greater powers than any human prior still isn't enough to best an agent, and Agent Smith eventually kills Neo. But in the real world, Trinity revives Neo with a kiss. Back in the Matrix, Neo realizes his potential as the One, easily bests Smith, and rejoins the crew in the real world. In the end, Neo warns those in power that things are different now, that people will be awakened, and that there's nothing they can do. Then he fucking flies. End of movie. All right, guys, before we move on to our first talking point, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor at Mubi. So Mubi is a movie streaming service, and each day Mubi introduces a new movie, and you have 1 month to watch it. Now, the reason why I like this is because, I don't know about you, whenever I get on Netflix, I spend about 45 minutes browsing and I never choose anything. So what Mubi does is they give you 30 perfectly curated movies to discover, and you can only pick from those 30 at a certain time, and there are constantly movies cycling out. So whether it's an acclaimed masterpiece, a cult classic, or a festival fresh darling, there are always awesome movies to discover. Plus, you can delve deeper into the films with exclusive interviews, video essays, and critical reviews on Mubi's network. So 2 of the movies that are currently on their schedule right now that I really love is Fish Tank, which is a British film that is actually the first film, or the first popular film that Michael Fassbender's in. So if you guys are Magneto fans, check that out. Also Ran, which is an Akira Kurosawa movie that he made in the early 80s, one of his later films that is actually an adaptation of Shakespeare's King Lear, which is also very good. So if you sign up with Mubi today, I highly recommend both of those films. So try Mubi free for 30 days at Mubi.com/Wisecrack. That's MUBI.com/Wisecrack for your free extended trial. There are also some cool features. They work an awesome discovery tool to find movies that would otherwise be buried or might not exist on any other streaming platforms. And they add a new movie each day. So if you guys want to be pretentious assholes like us, check out Mubi. They'll probably anyway.
And if I can plug too, so the movie that I've been producing for a little over a year right now, the director of the film writes a lot on their blog platform because his debut feature had distribution on Mubi. His name is Isaiah Medina, and if you want someone who is really fucking smart and really fucking into like this film stuff, even wankier than I get, check out Isaiah Medina. His shit on Mubi is legit.
Oh, cool. Rock and roll. Real life connection here. All right, guys. So I'm a little torn as to how to approach this because everybody knows that there's a lot of symbolism, a lot of Christianity imagery and stuff like that, but and a lot of literary allusions, a lot of stuff. But I mean, I think we will get to that, but I don't want to emphasize that too much because if you guys are looking for that, go to any of our videos we did in Earthling Cinema on this, or Rebecca's film or Rebecca's episode on the Matrix Revolutions kind of touches on this a little bit. I kind of feel like that stuff is widely chronicled, and we will get into it a little bit, but I just don't want anyone emailing me saying, you forgot to mention that Neo is an allegory for the story of Christ. I'm like, I mean, yeah.
Duh.
I mean, well, yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, but every movie is. The Wrestler is an allegory for Jesus. Cool Hand Luke can be an allegory for Jesus. So
The
like, if we
Wrestler?
don't mention it, fucking Superman, like, it's oh yeah, dude, The Wrestler's my favorite Jesus movie of the last like 20 years.
That's hilarious. I'm gonna have to watch that again and just think about
Think
that.
about
I didn't think about it
Think
at
about
all.
it. That's right. Think about it from within that framework. Absolutely. And Mary Magdalene, come on. Except he doesn't choose Mary Magdalene. He chooses to sacrifice himself for the crowd. I mean,
You're
come on,
right.
just
You're
think about
right.
it.
No, you're totally right, man.
I haven't seen The Wrestler in a long time, but that never crossed my mind. That's pretty
Never.
awesome.
Never.
So we'll get to this stuff first, but I if you guys don't mind, I want to talk about this movie, its cultural relevance right now. This movie is almost 20 years old, and I think of it, when I watched it, I really saw this movie as a piece of rebel art. I'm curious what you guys think about that, or do you want me to keep going?
Well, you said earlier, you said both sides. It's hard for me to see it on both sides, though.
Yeah, so, all right. So you know how, usually we don't talk about this stuff, but you know how, like, on the left side of the spectrum, we have, quote, like, woke politics, and on the right side of the spectrum, we have red pill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's basically the same thing.
Okay.
You're basically just saying that you're disillusioning yourself from some oppressive structure that has enslaved your mind. So it's funny how literally the word the red pill comes from the Matrix, and it's like this cultural icon that we use as a lens to understand this idea of awakening yourself to the truth. And so I just find, I just find it so interesting that both sides kind of co-opt the lesson of this movie to talk about their very different ideologies that are actually in polar opposition to each other. I think that's something that about this movie is so special in that regard.
Well, if I can, I mean, I think maybe it's because it goes back even further than that. I mean, obviously this film has direct allusions to Baudrillard's Simulacre and Simulation, right? But I think even more probably apt is its connection to Plato's allegory of the cave.
Sure.
And Plato's allegory of the cave, while yes, there are some debates among Plato scholars about whether or not Plato's allegory of the cave is about epistemology, whether or not how do we know the world? How do we kind of comport and understand the world in which we live? Or is it about politics? And that's an internal debate within Plato if people are interested in that, or in Plato scholarship if people are interested. But more importantly, the point is that it's about kind of awakening ourselves from the illusion that we live under in our normal everyday lived experience. And that's something that can kind of be fit into any sort of political or social or religious ideology. I mean, even from a Christian perspective, right? You can say, the scales fell off my eyes and now I see the truth. From a Buddhist perspective, you could kind of say something similar. So there seems to be some resonance with this sort of universal idea that we're living under an illusion. For Buddhism, it's the idea that the world is suffering and that our attachments to material things are what cause suffering. Now, it's not quite the same. It's going to have some different particularities, obviously, from the Platonist Western tradition and from the Eastern tradition. But nevertheless, it's this common theme that maybe the world isn't exactly how we tend to think it is in our everyday experience.
So it's funny you say that. I'm going to say what you said, but in a different way. So I was watching the movie and we got to the part where Morpheus says, "The Matrix is a computer-generated dream world built to keep the human race under control and turn them into this." And I thought, like, you can essentially play a game of fill in the blank that can be applied across the political or religious spectrum. So it can be, our world is a blank dream world built to keep blank under control and turn them into blank. And I think that whether you're on the left, whether you're on the right, whether you're a Christian, whether you're something else, this, like, fill in the blank formula, I think, can speak to so many people who believe that, that they're being oppressed by some sort of ideological system or some other system. And I just think that never has there been a movie. Because you think about Easy Rider. Easy Rider was the 70s version of the counterculture film. Back then, cultural unrest meant, like, checking out of the oppressive structure. It's like, fuck society. I'm going to get on my bike and I'm going to smoke weed and I'm going to do psychedelics. I'm just going to live on the road and stop by hippie communes and have, like, random sex. Nowadays, we think of the oppressive structure as something that literally has a veil over our eyes that we are plugged into, and we have to awaken ourselves and violently fight back on both sides of the spectrum. And that's why I find it so amazing and so interesting how people, especially in such our incredibly divided times, that this movie can be an icon for both sides. I mean, it just blew my mind when I was watching it last night.
Do you find that surprising because it seems like only like a left side should be able to do that given a particular kind of politics of resistance? Or do you find it surprising given all of the other kinds of political messages that the Matrix might put forward? And because it connects this idea of reality to certain kinds of statements about freedom or about choice or about free will or all of these sorts of things. And that might be why it's harder to turn it into like a kind of right emblem or something.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying. I'm just saying that it's amazing to me that in a time where things are so starkly divided, that people on each polar side of this division can both turn to this movie and say that this is a lens through which I understand my beliefs.
Yeah. Well, if leftism is essentially sort of politics of resistance, Corey Robin writes about this, that conservatism is essentially counter-revolutionary. So it would be like the resistance to the resistance. And there's this endless process of resistance, and then resistance to the resistance, and then further resistance to that new resistance, and then ad infinitum, right? So in that sense, it kind of makes sense, rather than thinking that there is some sort of objective standard bearer that the left has a monopoly on resistance to, that then recognizes it as this sort of like contextual flow of back and forth resistance to whatever the other polarity is. And so in that sense, it makes, I can kind of get it. Like, it does seem to make sense. And this is someone as, I'm coming from the left, whereas when I first found out about this idea of the red pill being monopolized by kind of what I would consider a counter-revolutionary or reactionary tendency, I was kind of like, how does that work? And it took me a little bit to kind of figure out how I could justify it without just sort of like just accepting it at face value. And now I kind of I fully get it from.
Well, you could even say that the machines are the counter or are the resistance to the humans.
Right. Exactly.
So.
Well, and there are a lot of leftists. There's this movement that's really popular, especially in the UK, based on the heels of this book, actually, the one that we're adapting into a movie right now. It was a bestseller. It was called Inventing the Future. And it's about fully automated luxury communism is what they call it, right? And it's this idea that we can use the tools of technology to sort of create new systems of equality and things like that moving forward. But so think about it. If we're harnessing AI like this movie does, and then AI turns around and ends up biting our asses and then becomes our new masters, then yeah, maybe it is a sort of way that you can see that the revolutionary tendency has now become the new master, and then resistance to that would be the sort of counter-revolutionary impetus.
But that's what seems so interesting to me, and why I said that sort of the second and third films are kind of gaining a more special place in my heart these days, because as I was, I spent an entire summer, like 3 months, going back and forth with Jared about how we were going to do this, what went wrong on Matrix Revolutions, and rehashing it and fighting about it and then rehashing it again. And then, and it kind of came down to this sense that the kind of simple binary that's set up in the first, right, in the Matrix, that there's the real world and then there's the not real world, and that's pretty simplistic. And you're going to wake up into the real world, or you're going to go to sleep and then be in the not real world, be in the Matrix, and that is totally fucked up in the second and third films.
Yes,
and it's not. It doesn't just become, oh, here are these like machine overlords. It's actually like the machine. We actually get a little bit of this right when Morpheus is explaining what the Matrix is. He's like, actually, we didn't even treat the machines that great, so. Maybe like he's not giving them an excuse for their rebellion, but he's sort of like, yeah, we didn't really handle that very well. And then it became, it was who fired the first shots, we're not sure, but it became clear that there were these two sentient beings and they couldn't get along. And so then kind of shit happened. And so, all this to say that it seems like this, one of the problems with I'm coming from the left, though I understand a kind of right taking up if you see certain problems in the world and you think that they're a result of, as Austin is saying, right, sort of like left rebellion or this left idea of progress, which is actually quite a problem because it takes us away from our values or whatever. I can see how you might be able to take something as simple and sort of reductive as the red pill and co-opt it to be something that's meaningful for you. But ultimately, if you get past the first Matrix movie, those distinctions between the real and the fake and what's good and what's bad and who's free and who's not free and the machines as, like bad folks, that all gets complicated in a way that feels like it's a lot harder for it at that point to be taken up by a kind of right-wing ideology. So
which is why I think that for the we should definitely do the second and third films, and I think that this conversation gets
really.
I don't mean to... No. I think that the way that I was kind of, and maybe it was because, Rebecca, that we did that video and we were kind of talking about it, that I then kind of came back to this and was looking at it through this lens. But yeah, I think that through the second and third movies, that's going to be a super interesting conversation. But what I wanted to ask was, do you guys think that how much of, is there a chicken and egg thing going on? I guess my question is this idea that we can be completely oblivious to the system of control or this system of like thought control or whatever that people are, quote, liberating themselves for, whether you're on the right or the left. Do you think that The Matrix gave birth to the common thought that, oh, everything around me could be bullshit? Like, do you think that, or was it that The Matrix just gave voice to that? Because I kind of question that, because The Matrix is such a universal thing that everybody, even if you haven't seen the movie, you understand the concept. You understand that, there was, like as Morpheus said, it is a world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. Like, I just kind of feel like we're all Neos in a sense, and people can kind of like, and because of The Matrix, when, anytime that we have a grievance with culture or grievance of authority, we interpret it within the lens of The Matrix. Do you guys think that The Matrix had a profound effect or in the way that we think about disillusioning ourselves from authority?
I just think it gave it the picture for it. I think people have been going through oppression and going through like the government is against us, rich people, poor people. That whole system has been going on forever since the beginning of time. But I think this movie gave it like the baseball card for it. It was like, hey, this is going on. This is the movie. This is explaining everything. I don't really have to say anything. Just watch The Matrix, and this is my cause. But this shit's been going on forever, though.
And that's why I'd never thought of it as the essential counterculture movie. But even, because no one on the conservative right in the 70s gave a shit about Easy Rider, which is why I think this is so amazing. How this has become more culturally relevant and on both sides. I think there's definitely a very robust reading of the film that suggests that it probably was intended to be more of a left-wing film. And we can get into a little bit more of that later, but I just find it so amazing how people on both sides of the spectrum, and I do my best here at Wisecrack to be like as much of a centrist as I can. So I just find it so amazing.
But I think the question might be, it goes back very far, right? Obviously, as Austin pointed out, this is Plato, so at least several thousand years. But I think maybe another way of framing the question, another way of thinking about the question is kind of reversing the cause and effect. So maybe it's the case that because like the 90s were so filled with a kind of rebellion and so filled with a kind of like political ethos, they made it possible for something like The Matrix to be as big a hit, right, as it was. So rather than thinking of The Matrix as the thing that kind of generated or became a person for a particular kind of era, it might actually be the opposite. Now, there was a kind of era going on that made it possible for The Matrix to become a voice at all, or to be so well received, or to be something that then had as much kind of gravitas as it did. If you'd released that in the 80s, like as you're suggesting, right? If you do other movies, they don't have the same kind of affect or impact on society. So I think we can say something about the culture of the 90s actually making way for and allowing this kind of radical film to be made and to be as popular as it was in the first place.
Well, the interesting thing, like back then we were all afraid of Y2K. Remember that? Like this was like the Y2K.
Yes, I do remember Y2K.
Right before it.
Yeah, this was the Y2K paranoia movie.
Did we have
That's
any?
right, man. Y2K. Yeah, no, I was just thinking that too, with cell phones coming everywhere, and are we just living a digitized existence and all this shit? And, is life, like Greg was saying, are we in a computer simulation ourselves? And even though the film explores themes that have been addressed in religious and political and philosophical circles forever, this is the first time I think that I know, at least at the popular level, unless you're talking about like fucking Terrence McKenna, but like who outside of like psychedelic circles knew who Terrence McKenna was before Joe Rogan started talking about him, right? But the idea is that we're gonna, that we're living in this like fantasy world and that we have to break free from it. At the popular level, this film, it gave us a language that could latch onto that sentiment, maybe that made the film. So if the transcendental conditions, like Rebecca was saying, was the era of the 90s, right? Then the film came around, and then once the film came around, then we had a language to actually articulate the sentiment that we all sort of felt before.
even if you isolate the idea of the red pill from its like, new political meaning, just like, even in like a decade ago, people would say like, oh, come on, Jared, you want to go to this party? Take the red pill, bro. And like everyone
was using it.
Yeah, everyone wants to take the red pill. You're a bitch if you take the blue pill, right?
No, you know what? There's actually a movement now online of blue pillars. Have you seen this?
Oh God, no. Tell me.
The idea
Are these like the flat earthers?
Well, I probably, right? But it's like, no, don't take the red pill. Like, don't buy into this wokeness and just kind of like hunker down into kind of common sense or whatever. But there's actually an online movement that's now kind of, I guess they would view themselves as progressive, because the red pilling has become seen as like some sort of cool status quo position. So they're like kind of reacting to that, but there's still, it's very weird.
Yeah, so now I'm just like losing track of what you mean by red pill. Are you talking about the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so think of red pillar in the way that it's understood now, right? The idea of
the political thing, kind of like what they're disillusioning you from is from like what they would call like PC authoritarianism, like culture, like PC culture, basically.
Right. So now blue pillars would be like, no, like don't get woke and don't like try to go down the rabbit hole, whether it's on the left or the right. But just the idea is that don't take the red pill. Take
Stay
the
asleep.
Pill.
Yeah.
Stay asleep.
Keep those eyes wide shut.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't do
Exactly.
anything.
Yeah.
Keep working. Has there been a Matrix type movie since though? Except for like, I know like on YouTube there are plenty, but like anything like in the mainstream.
I don't think anything, to Austin's point, I wish I remember what Austin said, that it gave us the language to, what did you say?
Oh, I don't know. Sometimes I say shit.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
So like gave us the language to which to understand or to like
vocalize the transcendental condition of the 90s.
Right.
Yeah. It gave us the language to articulate a sort of felt sense.
I don't think so. I don't think there's ever been a movie that really communicated an idea that really affects people as profoundly as this one that I can think of.
Yeah.
What do you guys? Can you guys think of anything?
I mean, no.
Yeah, if you mean in
it's
this very
hard.
particular kind of like political sense.
Well, but not
then
only in a
I don't
political
think
sense,
so.
because for me,
Even just epistemological.
for the first 15 years of
yeah.
my, or the first like 20 years of me appreciating this film, it was completely an existential sense. It could be an existential sense, a political sense, a sociological sense.
Okay.
Just this idea of like questioning the reality around you.
Question everything.
Question everything.
Well, I think people that, at least in my circle, people that really, really love The Matrix are also like huge conspiracy theory folks. People that really love The Matrix are always like giant trees and like inner earth type shit, or, flat earthers. I love flat earthers, by the way. I've never met a group of people so dedicated to a cause. Even, may it be dumb, or I just love your dedication. I think people that are really deep into The Matrix are just open to different beliefs, or just bunking the system or going against it.
Yeah, so I agree, and more so, like in a sense, The Matrix gives us this. Yeah, I mean, like if our reality could be fake, then the Earth could be flat, and blah blah. And it's like, once again, The Matrix isn't a documentary; it's not true necessarily.
What?
Yeah, no, I know. But it is funny. Like if I showed somebody, when I was watching it, I was thinking like if I showed this movie to somebody for the first time who had never seen it, they'd probably look. It's like, oh, it's this idea. Yeah, I mean that's like 50-50 probably possible. That like we live in a simulation, Whereas in the 90s, it was like everybody knows that's not true.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Before we move on, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors over at Cover. So. I don't know about you guys, but car insurance buying really sucks.
It's awful.
Yeah, it's the worst. So it can be stressful, annoying, confusing, it's difficult, it's archaic. Luckily, with Cover, you can always talk to an agent when you need to. Oh, sorry. So yeah, it could take forever. How do you even know what insurance you need for your house, your car? How do you know the best price, especially if you're living in a city like LA where, you're going to get like the prices can get freaking high, especially if you have an accident. So Cover is an app designed to make insurance less of a hassle. You can request a quote just by taking a picture on your phone. The app then searches policies from over 30 plus providers to get you the best rate for your car, your home, and pretty much anything else. So you can request a quote via the app on the phone at any time, so it's insurance on the go. The app does the comparing for you from 30 plus insurance carriers And rest assured, they're going to find the best deal that suits you. Make sure you're not paying too much, and make sure that you're not paying for, a situation that it makes you more liable than something that you need. So it also finds the right coverage level, which is what I was just talking about. The insurance level that best suits your needs, not too much, not too little. It's fast. Signing up is easy. You can get the initial quote in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And, all you got to do is take a picture with your phone. It's convenient. They got friendly agents that will arrange a time to chat with you about the policy, so you don't have to be on hold. They will call you. So save time and money with Cover. Visit cover.com/wisecrack to get started. That's cover.com/wisecrack. All right, guys.
Fuck yeah, Jared.
Thank you.
That was very professional.
Oh, man,
He's
crushing it over here, man.
He is,
yeah.
Hey, real quick, before we get too far into the weeds of thematically and philosophically examining this film, can we also just talk about how this film, from a cinematic perspective, from the cinematography, the special effects,
beautiful.
This movie was made in 1999, and the special effects still fucking hold, man.
Totally.
Absolutely.
And I is it Wachowskis or Wachowskis? I've never known.
I always said it was the Cha.
Oh, really? I always called it Wachowski, some hockey players.
I thought it was Wachowski too, but we'll say Cha. Since Jared runs this shit, we'll say Cha.
Oh, I mean, I don't care.
Wachowski.
No, but I've seen all of their films since Sense8, right? And I like Sense8, but Cloud Atlas and Jupiter Ascending, that shit just did not do it for me at any level, at the level of script, at the level of character. And then even special effects like Jupiter Ascending was a little too much for me. Cloud Atlas, Tom Hanks's makeup is whack.
I don't think those movies did it for anyone, to be honest.
Oh, but guys,
I like Jupiter Ascending.
That's the beauty of them, though. That's the beauty of having a hit that's so good that nobody gives a fuck if your movies suck. You still made The Matrix. It's their Godfather.
And they can just be
Godfather.
low entertainment for the rest of their lives. And that's, except for Sense8,
See, I think Sense8 is actually really good.
I think so,
I haven't seen the second season, but the first season I thought
I couldn't get past the first episode.
It was all right.
See, you know what? It's same thing. It grows on you.
It does.
Same with me.
I watched the whole season.
But regardless, this film was something remarkable. It's there are some people they have these theories about directors, right, that they've only got one good film in them, or they've got 2 good films in them. And I feel not that the Wachowskis aren't going to make films that aren't great moving forward. We don't know. They're still young. But it seems like they had so much, and I know they had made films prior to this too, but sometimes it's this perfect confluence of theme, of financiers, of producers, of cast, of technology at that time and that place and time and space. They all come together, and it seems like it all kind of contracted on this film in a way that was just really spectacular.
Also, that hunger, like we talked about last week, man. It's when you can't fail. You can't fuck this up. This is if we don't get this shit right, it's not going to happen. And they made it, man.
Yeah.
I'm sure they stayed up. I'm sure they didn't sleep, man. 23-hour days. Hey, bro, and they're brothers. You know what I mean? Punching each other in the face. Get this script fucking right, man. They're letting us direct us. That hunger that they didn't have for Jupiter Ascending. You know what I mean? They didn't have that hunger for this one.
It's like Conor McGregor when he was first in the UFC. He used to joke around about how he would spend all of his money that he had made so that he wouldn't lose that hunger to want to have to train to
Which
fight.
is crazy.
These days, he can't even spend that much money.
Man.
How can you spend that
After
much money?
Floyd? Nah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I there's one more thing I wanted to say about the, not even political thing, but let's talk about the filmmaking because it's so amazing. I mean, I tell people that this is a movie you can watch with your eyes closed and it's still amazing because there is the sound effects and the score work together to create a very kind of melodic cinematic experience. The sound effects work in concert with the score and even just like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the rhythmic voices of especially Hugo Weaving, who plays Agent Smith, and Lawrence Fishburne. It's just it's musical, the whole movie.
Yeah, I want to know if that was an acting choice or if that was a directing choice, because that is so interesting to me, right? Sometimes actors they say, hey, listen, I think this is something that I've thought of in my script analysis or whatever. I just feel like this would be the way to talk, or he smokes a cigar or whatever it is. Did Hugo Weaving and Lawrence Fishburne, were they kind of directed that way by the Wachowskis? Do you think all of it was deliberate, or was it just like a confluence of happenstance?
Doesn't Hugo Weaving just play Hugo Weaving?
No,
like, isn't that
he's pretty he's got diverse talent, right?
No, but I mean, like, think about V for Vendetta, right, where he's like literally just a voice and a mask,
but that's
and
like
he
the
has
same
similar
directing team
affectation and tone in that as he does in The Matrix.
But you could say the same thing about Lawrence Fishburne. Like once after The Matrix, Lawrence Fishburne was kind of typecast as Morpheus. I mean, he even still is today, except for what is that, Blackish?
Yeah. Well, he's kind of Morpheus and Blackish too. He's like an old granddad Morpheus.
Yeah.
See, whenever I think of
from
him,
the
I
South.
think of Tuskegee Airmen. You ever see that movie?
Totally.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, the George
it's
Lucas
hard
film.
for me when I think of Lawrence Fishburne. I forget that he's Morpheus actually until I see Morpheus.
Apocalypse Now
I saw
too.
Tuskegee Airmen like 1,000 times.
For me, he's always young Apocalypse Now and Morpheus.
15. He was 15 in Apocalypse Now. Crazy.
Oh my God, I didn't even remember that he was in that until just now.
I mean, he's clean.
Yeah, he lied about his age.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, this, and like more to our discussion, was it 2 times ago with the Avengers, we talk about the difference between cinema and television and the kind of nuances of these mediums. The way that this movie moves like an opera, it's very, in a sense, like they're without recitatives, the way that like the melodic speech with the sound design that keeps everything moving. That's something you don't see in television, and I would point to this movie as a prime example of what makes cinema distinct from television, even today, even with things like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad.
I like that.
Yeah, and remember, this movie won the technical awards at the Oscars, which is a huge achievement. I mean, this movie, the idea that in 1999 that the Academy would give any kind of award to a movie starring Keanu Reeves back then says a lot.
That's true.
And this one editing, sound design, and special effects, which I think all are so well deserved.
Did this movie also like change like the image of Keanu? Because you remember Keanu was sort of like a trash actor. You don't think it changed him?
No. I think it did. I mean, I love Keanu Reeves. I'm a huge John Wick fan, but
also I'm like, did I love Keanu after The Matrix? Because I don't know if I loved him before The Matrix.
I didn't. You're probably right.
I don't think I loved him before The Matrix, but I definitely love him.
Bill and Ted.
I mean, yeah, as a kid, as a stoner kid, I loved Bill and Ted.
Oh, I still love Bill and Ted.
Point Break is awesome too. But it was still like, hey, bro, like,
right.
Come
he
was
still kind of a joke, but he was like a pretty joke.
He still is in this film, though. You know the bit when Morpheus jumps in, he goes, "Whoa." I mean, he's still Keanu, dude. You know, it's just that for some reason that chilled, stoic kind of aloofness works perfectly.
Oh yeah, for sure. One of the things I like the most about this movie and the most about Keanu is that, first of all, another thing that people know, but it's so amazing that Lawrence Fishburne, Keanu Reeves, and Hugo Weaving learned kung fu for this fucking movie. That's amazing. And I love how Keanu Reeves, like the time that he spent all of his training with Yen Wu Ping, who was the fight choreographer, it became a passion in his life. And even today with John Wick and The Man of Tai Chi, he's still like one of the leading voices pushing action cinema, basically action cinema in America that isn't just special effects and like huge spectacle is like Keanu Reeves is like one of the few warriors making sure it still happens. And fucking hats off to him for that. So one other thing I wanted to talk about, I don't know if you guys agree or not, but when I say that this is a piece of rebel art, I think a lot of people, and I'm curious if in your angsty teen years any of you guys experienced this too, we kind of project onto Neo, especially in that first act. If you're different or you see something that other people don't see, you in a sense, in like a metaphorical way, are waiting for Morpheus to call you and to tell you that you're special and that the society around you is all, quote, phony. Like, this is kind of a Holden Caulfield kind of movie for our generation. And then when you consider that the Wachowskis, ended up getting like sex changes later on, like this all kind of makes some sort of sense in a weird way. Did any of you guys project onto Neo like I did when I was a teen?
I projected onto the whole scheme of the movie, just the thought of it. Being in, when he was talking about, I know why you sit in front of your computer late at night. I know why you don't feel like you get along with everybody. Why you feel like you're in this fake world. I just, I dug the whole theme of the movie.
Yeah.
And being awake, when all the things started popping out of his, out off his body, and he's free now. Why are my eyes hurting? Because you've never used them before. Which is hella Christian. Yeah. And as a dude from the church, it just made me, I don't know, man. It made me question religion. It made me question family. It made me just question my friends. It made me question everything when I was 19.
Yeah. Me too. It was like the exact same thing.
Yeah. Great movie.
See, I didn't go through my teenage angst until my 20s. I was always a little bit of a, like, in certain senses, I was a bit of a late starter with certain things. And for me, it was actually, I had a religious experience into Christianity while I was high on some drugs, because I thought like demons were taking over my soul.
What drug?
Literally, it was weed, but it was laced with angel dust.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Did you know?
So you want to talk about a crazy hallucinogenic experience? Yeah. Fucking PCP will do it for you.
Yeah, that's the rabbit hole right there.
Yeah, dude.
Literally.
Yeah, dude. So I woke up the next day after I had or whenever it was, to get the next afternoon after this crazy experience, and I was like, fuck this, I'm going back to church, because I felt like I had seen behind the veil, you know, like I saw the wizard was the wizard, and I was like, fuck, man, if that's the way that the world is, then something's got to change. And I thought that I had seen this sort of spirit world behind this, and so I had that radical conversion into Christianity. So for me, it was like a retroactive thing where now I watch The Matrix and I'm like, oh, now I get it. And then of course now I've had like a conversion sort of to a post-Christian type of thought, and doing work on Marx and things like that. I think a lot of the idea of, I like how Jared said earlier, you could like do a Mad Libs and fill in the blank of like, the world is run by X, and you are oppressed by these people, and you are a slave, and you're turned into this. I mean, just instead of turning yourselves into a battery like they are in this, just use labor power. And that's,
exactly.
Totally.
Which is
a battery.
I filled in the fucking blank for what I thought Austin would say.
yeah, for real. I mean,
yeah,
you can totally do that, right? And so I still, now I see this film and I'm like, wow, there's interesting political readings, there's interesting psychological readings, psychoanalytic readings. You could read this through a Lacanian lens that would be really interesting. And you can then, of course, do the Baudrillard reading of postmodernism, that we live in this age of digital images where there are just copies of copies, and that the original doesn't really exist. There is no such thing as the real, which, by the way, is where the first film gets Baudrillard wrong. In the second film, the second film actually gets it right, and it's when Neo is able to control the machines in the quote-unquote real world, because at that point, then even the real world isn't real, because it kind of blurs the line between.
I mean, I hear you, but man, like that's where I think that the Wachowskis just like, like in a sense the world was on the edge of like this epiphany, and the Wachowskis held everyone's hand and like awoke them to this idea. But in terms of like the postmodern dissolving the line between real and unreal, they were so ahead of their time. Everyone saw The Matrix Reloaded and was just like, what the fuck was that?
Yes, you're right.
And I'm still not entirely convinced that just because they get Baudrillard right in the second one that makes it a good movie.
No, you know what? You're right. It's so weird. I only like that scene at a conceptual level, like that, I only like that movie, I should say, in that scene at a conceptual level. Like, I don't even like the whole other part of the movie. It's just that it's like, okay, cool. Now they've done something interesting. It's not just Plato's allegory of the cave. Now it's actually, okay, what is real? Like in a bigger sense. And that's why I kind of like the second. The third film I haven't seen in a long time, and I feel like I actually hope we do it on this podcast, because I have a memory in my mind of it being awful.
Oh, it's so bad.
How many times?
It's so bad.
How many times have you seen it, Greg?
I've only probably saw the third one maybe 10 times.
That's so many. I've only seen it.
That is a lot.
Well, I mean, I just love The Matrix. I love it. I try. Look, guys. I saw the second one. I was like, all right, I like the second one. These guys are too rich because the second one sucks a little bit. It sucks a little bit. I still dug it. But the third one, I was like, oh, they're done. They don't care anymore.
But they made them at the same time.
Yeah.
They made the second and third at
Yeah.
the same time.
Yeah.
So it's amazing why they degrade so much from the second to the third if they literally were made consonant with one
That's
another.
how good the
you
first
know?
one is. It's
Yeah.
Godfather. It's Godfather
It,
syndrome.
it is Godfather, but I remember when Rebecca and I were revisiting the second two for that video, I just remember thinking, like, I can't imagine what it must be like for them to have that kind of expectations. Like, if you
Yeah.
created The Matrix, then not only you created a badass action movie, but you awakened a whole generation, and now you have to
Yeah.
follow that up, and you revolutionize special effects.
Totally.
And you have to follow that up. Fuck, man. Like,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
you-
talk
whatever.
about
And you have to
pressure.
follow
Oh, it's
it up.
hard. It's hard.
You have to follow it up by basically confusing everything you set up in the first film.
Well, they didn't
That-
have
that-
to, but they stuck by their guns. They said, no, this is a
Yeah.
philosophical text.
Yeah.
They just didn't break it down enough. I think they thought that their viewers were as smart as they were, and they're not. The first one was almost like gravy, man. I
Yeah.
mean, they just
Yes,
pour it down
exactly.
people's mouth, man. And then the
Yeah.
second
Yeah.
one, they were juggling. You know, they put a fire stick in there, juggling that too, and it was just too much for people.
Yes, and it's taken me
Yeah.
15 years to catch up with them. Like, literally,
It
like
was too hard.
like until Rebecca and I worked in that video, I don't think I got it, and I still don't entirely get it. And once again, like, getting it, I don't think really makes the movies any more watchable.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's how like ahead they were of me for
No, I
those
agree.
second two films.
I agree. They're great. It was just too.
Yeah,
you
I mean,
know?
one of the reasons that the first film is so good too is that you really do get invested in Neo's journey. Like Jared, you were saying that you kind of aligned with him because you saw an ally on screen that was like, oh, that motherfucker too. He feels like he hasn't quite found a place, and now he's seeing that the world is scattered, and that's challenging me in my own existential journey. And then not only that, but then there is a really kind of sweet love story too that also is
beautiful.
taking place that we haven't talked about. But that really kind of and there's a care that all of these people are invested in the future of Zion, right? Which I think adds a lot to this idea that we can become invested in the story beyond just the philosophical and conceptual themes, which dehumanizes it and makes it so that unless you're a philosopher or you're interested in this type of thinking, maybe you won't be able to invest in much. But the first one, you can still get caught up and fuck, man. The world is under attack by machines, and I'm in this, and you don't have a place in the world, and here's this badass woman role, which is also pretty fucking awesome.
Totally.
So there's a lot of stuff that you can invest in, I think, just as at the level of the populace that maybe the second and third films don't give you enough of.
They're just really hard to follow, and it's just like dialogue, information dump, philosophy lesson, and then spectacle action scene.
Now,
And
wait
yeah.
a second. I was told we were not going to talk about the second and third
Oh,
one.
I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely.
I'm
She
going to
called
bust
me
out the guns and start defending shit, but so like
No,
we
no,
don't
we-
have to. But
But
if
we
you
will.
tempt
We
me,
will do those movies. So I want to talk a little bit more about the sociological undertones. So first of all, I think that Rebecca brought this up about subverting female gender roles. I think that once again, Trinity's action sequence in the opening, so awesome. I had a high school crush on Carrie Ann Moss
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
I mean,
Hell
me
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some really interesting parts, like when Neo says he thought Trinity was a guy, when the cop says, I think we can handle one little girl. And then, I don't know if you guys have ever thought about this, but that final scene where Trinity awakens Neo with a kiss, I always kind of thought of that as kind of like a weird inversion between
Yeah.
Prince Charming and Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like more of the female empowerment thing.
Yeah.
And by the way, have any of you guys seen Bound, the movie they made before that with Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly? It's like a lesbian thriller, and it's so
that was-
good.
Is it really good?
It's so good.
Yes.
It's probably their
Yeah,
second
I
best
didn't know that was
movie.
them.
Okay. I mean, I was reading about the movie when I was going over the Matrix stuff, but I was like, all right.
And Joe Pantoliano is in it. I love him. He plays Cypher.
Of course, yeah.
Are you a Sopranos fan?
Of course.
Dude, yeah. Fucking Ralph Cifaretto. Yeah, so
Awful.
good.
Awful man.
Awful man. He's so hateable.
In that character, yeah, he's terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's awesome. Bound, that's what it's called. Okay.
And then the reason why I said earlier that I think that this movie was probably at least conceived with more of kind of like a left cultural or like a left rebellious thing is because, you know, our agents are named Smith, Jones, and Brown. They're white guys in suits, reminiscent of kind of old school hegemony. They've got Another part I think is very subtle is like during the standoff between Smith and Morpheus. Morpheus says, "You all look the same to me," and then Morpheus and then when Morpheus loses, the police come in and kind of beat him, and it looks very Rodney King.
Yeah.
They beat his ass. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
With the sticks and everything, right? Yeah.
And then I'll never forget the like. Try and put your guys into the first time you watch this. Like, how did you respond when you saw the Oracle? You know, they're like playing up like the Oracle, this mystical being, and then you walk into a room and you see this like domestic black woman with cookies.
Yeah, I think what I loved about the Oracle is that she that's the first thing she says to Neo. She's like, "Yeah, not what you thought, huh?"
Yeah.
It's like it was beautiful, but I also have to say it, and I mean she dies. That's why they have to replace her.
Yeah,
which also just fucked up everything for
I know.
it was just everything went bad for 2 and 3, man.
I know, and you know what? Like Aaliyah was supposed to be in the second and third ones, and she died during the filming.
Exactly.
Yes.
And
I'm sorry.
fucking Gloria Foster, who plays the
I
Oracle,
haven't heard that name in a long time.
is so good.
It makes me sad.
Oh, she's awesome.
Yeah,
She's
But I will
awesome.
say-
and she's up there with those same people who have an amazing rhythm of speech. With right up there. Like her lines are delivered in such an incredible cadence.
Tone, everything.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to jump in and say I was thinking about this earlier. I mean, I don't want to be like Debbie Downer here, but I will say that I'm not sure. I don't think the first film, I don't think any of the films passed the Bechdel test. So, you're familiar with the Bechdel test? Two women talking to one another about something other than a man for like longer than, I don't know, any amount of time. I think it's like actually like 20 seconds, but I'm not sure this film achieves it.
But is
like
the
at
Bechdel test really the only way that we can measure if a film has
No, but I
progressive
had only just
sociological
begun.
undertones?
I'd only just begun my
Okay.
point. So that's the first point.
Really?
It doesn't pass the Bechdel test.
Are they really
Yeah.
only talking about Neo in this?
So
Like two women?
even we get this sense we get
Oh my God.
we're told that Trinity had a conversation with the Oracle, and the only thing we're told about that conversation is that she's supposed to fall in love
Damn.
with Neo. And I also just don't like. I mean, I like that she's a strong, female lead. I like that they invert this kiss, so she's the one who wakes up, but she's not the savior. It's still a white man, and she's sort of his woman, right? Like she goes from being this sort of independent warrior to being somebody who's basically like the, just like Stuppen the savior, and that I just don't. Yeah, so that for me was like a little bit of a letdown. I would like to see a strong woman
today,
in a film.
but were you let
that
down in
isn't-
1999?
And Neo's half white.
That's right. He's half Native
yes,
American.
yes, you're
so there
right,
you
you're
go.
right.
He's Asian, right? Isn't he Japanese? Isn't Keanu Reeves like Filipino or Japanese?
Oh, I thought it was Native American. I actually don't know.
I thought he was Hawaiian.
I'll Google it.
So,
Right, but were you?
I thought he was Eritrean. I don't know what you're talking about.
And if it makes you feel any better, originally it was supposed to be Will Smith.
Yeah.
And I'll
yes,
also say
that does make me feel better.
And I'll also, I mean, right, but like, were you really outraged in 1999? Nobody was. This is like contemporary trendy ideology. This is not like.
Well, I can
no,
guarantee you there were some scholars.
Absolutely.
There were some scholars who were still kind of like in the 90s. But yes, in terms
And
of
I
like
will
the popular language, yeah.
I was kind of outraged because at that time I was already reading like feminist science fiction from the 70s, where I mean they were. I mean, it seems kind of old fashioned when you watch it. Even when I was in high school, given the other literature that I was reading at the time, it was like, well, okay. I mean, sure, you don't get these sort of roles on film where the first character you see is like a badass female kicking ass. That doesn't happen very often. Nevertheless, it ends up taking on kind of a tropish quality and a not very original quality in that regard. So I'm not saying that it's all bad. I'm just saying if we want to recognize the good, let's also recognize that it's a bit more complex. And maybe they just did that to get like, the audience to swallow it, right? Like, I mean, I don't know why they did it.
Because there are
just feels
Hollywood
like it's-
mandates that
Yeah,
like you
exactly.
want to have an
So-
action
and
movie.
that's
It's got to star Keanu Reeves, because he's a sellable star.
So we just have to recognize it as a limit and as something that they probably could have done better. Even if we say we know why they did it, I think they could have,
Not true indeed.
Yeah,
Does it change in the second and third
I'll agree
film
to
at all?
disagree there because I don't think that. I mean, this is a piece of entertainment, and like it's not a piece of propaganda, and I don't think that art has to make a socially progressive statement. And the Wachowskis or whoever is in charge of the studio is allowed to, include and disinclude whatever political statement they want to make. So we can agree to disagree, but I do think that you're onto something in that in the sequels and in general, like you see that Zion is populated by mostly non-white people.
Totally.
Mostly black people, Asians. And I definitely think that the Wachowskis, yeah, I mean, probably they wanted to have Will Smith. And I think that there probably is a very deliberate thing there and that they wanted a minority to be awakening themselves from like the white hegemonic world. It didn't end up being like that. It probably wasn't their original vision. But I still think that they do maintain what you're talking about in the sequels and in having a very diverse cast aboard the Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, super multicultural. I also think that was just a way of getting as many people invested in the movie as possible and having a heavy, strong woman lead too with, I mean, co-star. But I do see how Trinity did go like, you know, almost like sidekick level at the end of the first one. I didn't really think about that before. You awakened me to that one.
Greg is unplugged.
She red-pilled you.
She did, totally. I didn't see it so clear. I didn't.
Oh God, what was I gonna? Oh, you know the guy who plays Tank is Tommy Chong's son.
Really?
Yeah, from Cheech and Chong.
Wow, I can see that now.
Yeah, and apparently the reason why he's not in the sequels, I mean, they wrote it so that he died, but apparently
Because he's not a very good actor.
No, I actually thought he was good in the movie. The reason is because apparently he was a nightmare to work with.
No, the other dude was a nightmare to work with. The guy,
Dozer.
No, Dozer. Which one's the big one? The big one.
Dozer.
Yeah, Tank. It was a nightmare to work with. You're totally right.
He would like steal stuff from the office. He was constantly fighting with people.
He wanted more money.
Yeah.
He played Huey Newton in the Panther.
I do not think he's a good actor.
He played Huey Newton in the Panther movie. Yeah.
He played who?
Huey Newton in the movie Panther that was released probably maybe 2 years before The Matrix. Yeah.
See, I wondered, like, has he done a lot since? I haven't looked at his IMDb, but
nothing.
I actually think he's a really bad actor, and he's actually my weak spot in this whole film. You can tell that he's acting. You know, like one of my old acting coaches used to say that there are certain lines. He was a Scottish guy, and he said you don't want to squeeze your arsehole, and what he meant by that was like don't force it, right? Like don't try to force the emotion. You want to be authentic and truthful in the conditions into which you're thrown, right? But this dude, he's like the only thing where I watch it and I get cringy about it.
Oh, wow. See, I thought he was good.
He's also pretty. You know, you got to watch out for those pretty dudes, man. He's too pretty.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But no, I don't know. For some reason, I mean, I overlooked it, but I still, even watching it on this viewing, I was like, I get taken out, like, just momentarily. And then I'm like, all right, you got to get back
I think he got blacklisted, man. I think people found out because that's a huge, like, huge rumor all around like the acting community is that he was such an asshole from the first one that nobody touches him in the second one, and I haven't seen him in anything since, even commercials.
Right?
Yeah, me neither.
Right? I know.
He's probably in Berlin chilling.
Yeah. There's so much stuff to talk about. Like there are literary allusions to Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz in 1984. There's a lot of mirror imagery. There's chessboard imagery with the floor in where Neo comes to meet Morpheus. We didn't even get to talk about the pill scene. Best scene in a cinema ever? Yes, no? I think so. It's so good.
It's pretty good.
I want a painting of just Neo sitting across from Morpheus on my wall. Just, having the pill. Yeah.
It's a good scene, man. It is a good scene.
Do you want to talk about it real quick, Jared? I feel like you want to talk about it.
I mean, I basically just think it's amazing and I have the whole thing memorized and I don't really have anything else to say. It's just very special to me.
It's tough to talk about a film like this in an hour because beyond the film just being rich, I think it means so much to so many people. And obviously, like literally we could even say that probably like Wisecrack wouldn't exist were it not for The Matrix, right?
Well, I wouldn't have co-created it if it weren't for The Matrix because I wouldn't be in love with cinema and have an interest in philosophy if it weren't for The Matrix. There's no way.
Exactly. So I mean, through historical accident, this film has meant so much to you, and I think the rest of us on this panel, and then anyone else listening too. It has created a language for us. It's so tough to try to talk about it in an hour. It is literally one of those films that you can write books on, that you can think about, that you can muse about forever. You could talk about it in relation to what did it do in opening up a space in cinema. We talked about, and we got a lot of shit from some people about whether or not Avengers, the most recent one, is the death of cinema. could we say that in some ways this, and then a lot of people, they hit us up and they were like, well, what if it just transformed cinema and it wasn't the death of cinema? Regardless, we can keep fighting that on the threads on the interwebs if you guys want. But with this film, I think it's almost certain to say that it transformed cinema in very particular ways. Yeah. So it's so tough to fucking talk about it in an hour and 5 minutes or whatever.
See, I feel like it transformed the people who watched it, but I have a hard time really pinpointing how it transformed cinema. Like when I think it transformed cinema, I think of Star Wars and like Pulp Fiction. Star Wars created like, you know, kind of the special effects action movie blockbuster thing that dominated the 80s, and Pulp Fiction was kind of the start of like, you know, the Weinstein era of independent films that actually made money.
Yeah.
But what did this movie do for movies in general or the movie business?
I think special effects as well. I think
camera
work.
Effects. I was thinking of special effects.
Even in like the shitty parody movies, you know, everybody's doing The Matrix. I mean, it's almost like the flying crane, you know?
Exactly. You see people dodging bullets even today, like doing the
on the street.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. The Matrix, even if you just say, oh man, it's like The Matrix, it just has so many different connotations of what that could mean.
Yeah. They never say it's like Matrix.
I think it's really profound that you said
don't.
that it didn't change cinema, but it changed the way that we view cinema. Yeah. And whether or not we need to make a distinction between the two, there is something interesting about that, because that kind of fits into the ethos of postmodernity itself, right? It's not that it actually changed the objective conditions, but rather it just sort of reoriented ourselves within the conditions, which is really quite interesting to think, because maybe that's true. Maybe we don't watch cinema. Maybe we don't engage in media in the same way. And this film had, you know, was it like a link in the chain in that process?
If anyone is listening, I remember in my high school angsty days, I would go a lot on like fan forums. Like the two big ones that I was on all the time was matrixfans.net and thelastfreecity.com. Both of which are defunct, but that was my primer on philosophy. Yeah. That was my primer on how to read cinema, because I would obsessively every day after school go on those websites, and you know, the thing about that is that like it was less about fan theories. People weren't concerned necessarily with what's going to happen next. They just wanted to appreciate the film they had in front of them, and like, you know, talking about mythology and religion and philosophy. I mean, that's why, you know, I picked up Simulacra and Simulation in high school, didn't understand a word of it. I'm still convinced that no one understands a word of it. But you know, read Plato's Allegory of the Cave in high school. Like, it was just a huge awakening for me. And yeah, I mean, I could just go on and on.
Yeah, great fucking movie. Great movie.
Great fucking movie.
Wachowskis, y'all are awesome.
All right, so we're definitely, one of these days, going to get to The Matrix 2 and 3.
Yes.
And we will definitely invite Rebecca so she can...
Thank you.
Yeah, guys. This was fun. Thank you guys so much for reliving a religious experience with me. So that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. I want to thank Greg and Rebecca and Austin for joining me. Where can we find you guys on the internet? Greg.
Hey, Greg the Grouch on Twitter, Greg Comedy on Instagram.
Austin.
Hit me up Twitter, Austin_Hayden.
Rebecca.
Oh Jesus, I don't have Twitter or anything.
Good for you. Me neither.
So I am totally unplugged. So yeah. You'll find me in the real world, guys. You'll find me in the real world. That's
unplugged.
Nice.
And yeah, I could just go on just quoting Morpheus and Agent Smith for the next 20 minutes, just because I love the rhythm of their voice so much. I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Anyway, all right, that's it for today, guys. Catch y'all next week. Peace.
And goodbye from Hollywood, California.